Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing here, going over the week's biggest fights involving the biggest fighters and of course handing out some fighter grades. And as always, I'm curious to know what you guys think of some of the fights. What are some of your standout performances and fights of the weekend? We'd love to hear all of that down in the comments section below. It was a pretty busy weekend. We had some fights on both sides of the Atlantic. We had, of course, the fight with David Benavidez taking on David Lemieux here in Glendale, Arizona in the States. And then, of course, across the pond in London, we had Joshua Buatsi taking on Craig Richards in an interesting light heavyweight clash. So we had a couple of fights all over the place, and, as well as some other kind of interesting undercards that we will be taking a look at as well. So plenty of action. Of course, nothing major, no huge title shots or anything along those lines, but certainly some interesting action, so we'll be getting into that. So without much more rambling, let's hand out some of these grades. Now, the first fighter we're going to look at here is David Benavidez, who defeated David Lemieux via 3-round technical knockout in the super middleweight division, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is an A-. And quite honestly, he looked amazing. Lemieux kind of makes you look that way, but still, Benavidez had to perform, had to prepare himself accordingly and do his part, and he did that and then some on the night. In brief action, but very scintillating action from his perspective. He wants all the big names, and fans will begin to call for it now with these sort of performances, especially because he seems to keep improving. In this fight here, for example, he kind of showed it all. He showed the power, the speed, even some defense in the midst of some of those exchanges, which was very interesting and impressive in my personal opinion. And he just kind of needs that big name now to kind of do it up against. Really, the only reason I have an A- here as opposed to an A+ is because you have to kind of give him a little bit of a down mark for these, the matchup here. Not his fault, beat who's put in front of him, but once he's able to do these sorts of things against some of that bigger opponents that are out there for him, I think it'll be very interesting, so that's certainly going to be fun to watch. And the next fighter we're going to go with here is David Lemieux, who lost to David Benavidez in that 30-round technical knockout in the super middleweight division, and the grade that I'm going to go with here is a D+. Now, I'll get some of these positives, and there are very few of them, out of the way, but I will say he was incredibly brave and really was the sort of definition of keep on keeping on, keep on fighting, keep on pressing, going out on your shield. However you want to phrase it, that was sort of embodied in Lemieux's performance. That being said, he was entirely outgunned, outwitted, outmatched, and really had no business in the ring with Benavidez when it was all said and done. At the age of 33, he just doesn't seem to have anything left. What's more, he's not even fighting at his natural weight class. He's a middleweight who is really undersized for super middleweight and just showed how little he belongs in the ring with the elite fighters at 168 pounds. You sort of get used to older fighters being able to fight on as they kind of sort of progress and sort of evolve as fighters in the modern era, but that's not for all of them. That's not for every fighter, and it just doesn't seem like it's for Lemieux, as its best days seem to sort of be behind him, which is why he gets such a low mark in this fight. Now, the next fighter we're going to be looking at here is Joshua Buatsi, who defeated Craig Richards via 12-round unanimous decision in the light heavyweight division, perhaps setting up a title shot in the future, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a C+. And to be honest here, from the get-go, it just didn't look like Buatsi was on tonight. He just looked a bit off. His punches looked a little bit lethargic. I don't know, they didn't seem to have snap in them. They were a little too rounded, not as straight as I'd like to see them, and that I have seen them from him at some points in the past. He just doesn't seem to quite have what you might think he would have been showing by this point in his career. He's disciplined, he wants to learn, he's willing to make the sort of sacrifices that he has made by moving to California as a Brit and trying to, really home in on his craft, but it just doesn't seem like it will necessarily pay off for him the way that many on his team are expecting it to. The very top of the sport at 175 pounds, I think anyone of significance seems to beat him at this point. Granted, he could still use another 2, 3, even 4 or 5 fights to potentially, kind of improve himself as a professional. But even then, after a handful of fights have passed, do I see him beating Bivol? Do I see him beating Beterbiev? Probably not. I would actually think it's pretty much a pick 'em between him and Joe Smith, who's probably the least talented of the titleists at 175 pounds, which kind of tells you all you need to know. It's a very stacked division, especially at the top, and I just don't know if Buatsi is going to have enough to kind of make the sort of mark he's looking to make. Of course, stranger things have happened, and it's not to say he's completely devoid of talent, but this performance was not, in my personal opinion, after he sort of looked sluggish and kind of off and got into a war that he really didn't need to, made the fight a lot closer than it really should have been. It just doesn't bode well for him. But again, it's one fight. That's how it goes sometimes, and we'll see how this kind of, reflects the rest of his career. But in any event, sort of a middling performance, which is why he gets that middling grade. And the fourth fighter we're going to go with here is Jermaine Ortiz, who defeated Jamel Herring via 10-round unanimous decision in the lightweight division, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a B+. And I'm going to say the young man showed a lot of poise, didn't let the moment get to him. He even kind of got off to a slightly come-from-behind start, nothing major, but he had to kind of show his wherewithal at a relatively untested level, and he kind of did that, in my opinion. Got busy, made himself work and build into the fight, and really started to pour it on in those later rounds, which ultimately sealed the deal for him. Wasn't perfect, he got caught a few times. He, got into some exchanges he might look to try to avoid, technically speaking, but he took advantage of the opportunity and really advanced his career. At this point now, he has a win over a former titleist, possibly retired him because it does look like Herring might be hanging it up, which makes sense at this point in his career. But from Ortiz's perspective, certainly a great performance, and again, considering the circumstances, I'm going to give him a pretty high mark, considering that he did a pretty damn good job in this fight. And the final fighter we're going to go with here is Janibek who defeated Danny Dignam via 2-round knockout in the middleweight division, and the grade that we're going to go with here is an A. Really showed you what you wanted to see out of him. Solid hand speed, good movement with his feet, showed off some speed, even some power and technique, some combination punching, pretty much everything you're looking for. Loved his pullback counter and his combinations as well. Got tagged a couple times, but it was actually kind of a good thing because it showed he could take an okay shot, and for the most part that was few and far between, especially considering it was a relatively short fight, of course. Fun to see what he does against the top level, and that will be, of course, the utmost importance in terms of questions, but from what we saw, it's certainly going to be fun to look at with this kind of good combination of both classical, traditional skills with a bit of awkwardness to kind of throw opponents off. So definitely a fun fighter to watch, and will be interesting to see him going forward. Pretty solid performance-wise. He's getting such a high mark in this one. Honorable mention goes to Yoelvis Gomez, who defeated Jorge Cota via 10-round unanimous decision in the middleweight division. The grade that I would have gone with is something like a B-. Good for him to go the distance. It's a relatively short career for him so far, and he really hasn't put any rounds in the bank. Now he did. So that's pretty decent. I would also say he seemed frustrated at times, though he pretty much dominated this one. That's kind of good, too, in my opinion. Kind of shows that he has something to learn from, and if he can do that and kind of bounce back in a more positive way, it will show that he has some room to grow and is actually utilizing it. So decent performance, which is why I kind of would have went for that sort of middling grade there. In any event, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. We'd love to hear all your thoughts and kind of who your standouts were. We'd love to hear your kind of pick for Fighter of the Week, some of your grades that you might agree with me on or disagree with me. Leave all that in the comments section below. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB, and you can email me at jagunboxing@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out jagunboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, all that good stuff. And of course, be sure to check out my predictions coming later this week, specifically Gervonta Davis versus Rolly Romero. That'll be coming out pretty soon. And as always, until next time.